This session is about our planet Eris, which is an incredible dwarf planet just beyond Pluto. And what I found interesting when I was researching Eris was that she was not in my women's encyclopedias of myth. So she was not in Barbara Walker's book. I could not find anything about Eris in my books, which is exactly what the story of Eris is. So you can read the blog at galacticshamanastrologers.net and find out more about what Eris means as a myth and when her discovery was, but we're gonna go right into honoring a great soul who was always throwing in that golden apple to bring more full consciousness to what is not being acknowledged. So Jessica, who's in this group, is feeling very touched by the passing of Rachel Held Evans, who was standing up for the rights of women in the church, the rights of gay and lesbian people, the rights of all people to be equal, and women to be more announced in the church. And she passed today after writing an incredible piece around the sacredness of death on Ash Wednesday. So we want to honor her and say that her work will continue, bringing what is unconscious to the light to become more conscious. So we honor you, Rachel. And let's just all have a moment of silence for this courageous woman. And this is the work that's happening on the planet right now. Pluto and Saturn are at the South Node, which hasn't happened in 2,207 years. So all of our collective past is coming forward to be remade, to actually be destroyed, remade, transformed, and then rebirthed. And the South Node is the entire collective past. So what this brave woman was bringing forward was the place of all people in the church, in spiritual life. So she was the epitome of this Pluto, Saturn on the South Node, squaring Eris. And Eris wants to break frequency loops that are no longer helpful to anyone on the planet. So how often can that happen, that Pluto, Saturn on the South Node is square to the minute Eris? So Pluto's at 23 degrees, Eris is in Aries, and we have many planets passing over Eris right now of that kind of warrior feminine who throws in the golden apple and says, this has to be acknowledged. Now, the story of Eris in myth is that she was not invited to the party. So Rachel Held Evans was making it that everyone was invited. And that's the beauty of that. That everyone be invited. Okay? So it's been a long period of what we agreed to, which was the Iron Age, a period of materialism, where there was a lot of brutality, discord, and strife. And where we are right now with this tense square, which actually is going to go on for at least a year, because Pluto's going to retrograde back, and then Saturn is going to join Pluto, and they're both going to square Eris, is anything that's not being acknowledged is going to come up. And the golden apple was thrown in with a phrase that said, to the fairest. And Eris was known for kind of like creating enough discord for the party to have a look at itself. And what happened was three beings, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, started grappling and competing about who was the fairest, who was the most beautiful. I'm jealous of you. Oh, it must be me. You can imagine all of the strife that happened after that. And Paris chose Aphrodite to be that which was the fairest, which then trickled down, as you can imagine, to women quarreling and feeling jealous and who's the fairest, who's invited. All of that has been part of our history. So where we are now on the planet is, I've also asked the group to potentially watch this documentary called Time of the Sixth Sun launch.com. So you can look it up at Time of the Sixth Sun. It's a free launch through this Sunday.com, or you can buy the series. And there's a documentary of many indigenous people also who are saying, we've been extremely persecuted. We're throwing in the golden apple because now you need our help, because the planet is now revealing those prophecies of the animals are dying, the skies have those white cobwebs that were foreseen in the prophecies, and the people are suffering because our environment is suffering. So now the indigenous people are saying, oh, now you want our help. And one of the projects, this global project of listening, I think it's called the wiping of the tears, is what it's called, is the native people are going all over the planet and they have ceremony for something called the wiping of the tears. Where have I been persecuted? Where has my culture been persecuted? Where have we been ravaged brutally? And the woman who was speaking in this documentary said that she really had this hard heart of feeling like her people had been persecuted severely. And I think many of us know in the United States how much the Native people were persecuted. But when she started to travel worldwide, she saw that it didn't matter where you were from, that if you're a white milkshake person like me, who doesn't know where they're from, has no history at all, there is this deep level of persecution, this fear inside. So the Wiping of the Tears project was a ceremony in which people just were able to say what happened. That's all that needed to happen, okay? We're gonna listen to you and hold space while you tell what happened in Armenia, in Croatia, in Serbia, in Israel, wherever, okay, within your church, whatever it was that happened, we're gonna just hold space. And I feel like that is part of the same work that Rachel Held Evans was also doing, like, let's just say it, let's get it out there, let's hold space for this, let's make sure that there's room for everybody at the party. So without me going on and on, because I've been reflecting on this a lot this week, like, what does this mean when Pluto is tensely squaring Eris all year long? Let's hear from the group anything that's coming up for you this week of how to hold space while we wipe the tears or whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, I think it's the Eris that's been appearing in me, and I didn't realize until I realized, if you know what I mean. But I've been processing a lot of emotions this week, and I got to the point where I realized everything was a polarity. So it was like, I feel stressed and yet I feel peaceful, and it was this two realities in me, and it was so strong. I mean, it definitely is Eris, because the aspect in me, because it's this very warlike, chaotic feeling of awareness of society, awareness of community and distinctly aware of the need for community, which I feel growing, authentic, grounded community. And I feel it's growing both, locally and internationally. But it's that really strong, what is the point of life if we're going out earning money to pay bills? But I felt it so strongly. I actually felt depressed for like a day, because I'm like, I'm looking forward to my dinner, and that's the only thing I'm looking forward to. Like, it's just ridiculous. And it's really useful to see it in black and white. But I really had to just go on my knees and meditate. And all I realized I was doing was, I didn't have any, I just felt so distraught. I didn't have any kind of mantra or anything. I just sort of was there, hopeless, like, help me. And I just let the energy, like, flow through me. And I realized that what I was doing was just channeling. And I just let it flow. And I was like, I just, I connect with the universal reality of this and allow it to flow through me. And I felt so light afterwards, and and it continues. But I feel like empowered now, not weighed down so much by that feeling of strife, but and empowered and envisioned as to how I can increasingly hold space and express my truth, which I want to do. And I'm inspired by the life of this lady that we were mentioning. Yeah.
Well, in this group, we all know, or we looked in our charts to see if Eris was personal in our charts, and what transits, meaning planets in the sky, were going over that. And so Emmeline is feeling into Eris because we had the moon and Mercury go over Eris. Well, the sun went over Eris, then the moon, then Mercury. And soon Venus will go over Eris. So anyone can jump into like what that might feel like also, because we want to bring it down. So when Emmeline's saying that she really felt it and connected with Eris and went down on her knees and let it come in, that's the work of the Magi. I mean, that's why we study astrology, is to bring what's happening in the celestial realm down here and really feel it and ground it into the earth. Now, I don't think in this group, I thought Shannon was going to get on. Claude is, I think, the only one in our group who has Eris smack on a personal planet, and it's his son. So that's a very interesting thing too, to like hold the energy of Eris in your body is really amazing. And I have a lot of insight into what Eris is, knowing Claude, and he's listening right now, but he won't get on the computer with me because he's Eris. But it's incredible in Claude's life how he is kind of the golden apple. He'll throw it in and the discord will happen. And what's amazing is when I was studying with Demetra George, she told me that Claude's chart is what made, he gave me this gift to make me an incredible astrologer, because he would throw in the golden apple and I'd be like, oh my gosh, what are we doing now? Oh, whoa, where did this come from? And it would make me study and get down on my knees, Emmeline, and be like, what is this? What am I even doing on this planet? This is so hard. So some of Eris is she makes us define ourselves. Who am I? Am I about a community, or am I just about a paycheck? She makes us define ourselves. So who else wants to speak?
I'll share that I think in my natal chart I have an interesting connection. Eris is at 13 degrees in Aries. And then Neptune is at 13 degrees in Sagittarius, and both are fire signs. I can't remember if there's more to that shape, but I know that those two make a trine. And that you found the asteroid Maria conjunct the Neptune, and holding the polarity of Eris, the rebel, Eris, the goddess of strife, with Maria, and how our understanding of the divine feminine sometimes doesn't quite see her shadow aspects as well, and just trying to balance that in myself. And I think studying the charts and studying Eris has helped me embrace my more rebellious side. It also just clicked for me that I have Uranus in my first house, in terms of defining myself, and that can often mean that you're a rebel, which I have been. And I think for me, it's like aligning that rebellious energy. Like what am I really rebelling against? And focusing that in a way that's intentional. And I think I tend to be the one who says stuff. Like, I'm not afraid to just say things and shake up people's reality. And hopefully I'm learning how to do that a little better as I get older. But I think I've been feeling this transit as almost like a relief. Like, oh, now Eris can come more into our consciousness, or now we can really integrate our shadows. And I was really touched by the blog that you wrote about Estrella and her story. I had never heard her story before, and how she left. She was the last immortal being on Earth who left when humanity had just basically fallen into strife, but that she promised she would come back when we recognized our own shadow. And so that is really hopeful for me about this work. Is really about not delaying the processing of our shadows. And I think I have a gift intuitively that is challenging for some people, because I can see into people's shadows, and people don't really like that sometimes. You know, people would prefer to stay in their own understanding. And sometimes it's not even outwardly recognized, but there's an energetic there that I've just been mindful of. And just sometimes upon meeting people can have very strong reactions to me, and I can cause a lot of trouble just by walking in the room. So I think I'm feeling into like Eris as a Joan of Arc energy a little bit. Like I am so confident in my understanding of the unconscious that I'm willing to step in and help people become more aware of it. And I trust the heavens and the order of the divine cosmos, that if I go and attack the true enemy, that the angels of heaven will protect me. I mean, I think Joan of Arc had that kind of fervor and faith about her to charge ahead. So thinking about the female rebellious energy, that is very, I mean, I think all of us women are feeling that in different ways with the women's marches and all these different movements that have been happening across the world that we don't always see a lot of, but it's happening. So, and just in recently looking at Eris and Venus, as you mentioned, in my transit chart we were looking at, they were also conjunct. And so reflecting on what does that mean? And I think in my own life, I see myself rebelling against the norms of the community where people are prone to just stay busy, keep going, be disembodied, drink a lot, although I do when in Rome, I do also share in the beverages. But I feel myself rebelling and making people slow down to meditate or slow down to do yoga and get into a different state of mind with me. And then let's talk. Because so many people are just kind of running on trauma. And so I feel that Eris energy is being rebellious and saying, let's just actually get in our bodies and be quiet. And that seems very countercultural for where I'm at here, but also something that people hunger for. So I think I'm using that energy to help break frequency loops here and invite people into a different kind of embodied community. Oh.
Yeah, Grant, you had said something that Jessica was just touching on about the trauma, like making the trauma that's deep inside more conscious. To paraphrase Carl Jung, which Jessica and I also spoke about, one does not become enlightened by focusing on beings of light. One must make the darkness conscious. So all of that stuff that nobody wants to talk about, that's also Eris. And Grant, if you don't know Grant, I watch what he's posting from his men's groups, and he posted something really interesting from this book, The Body Keeps Score. And it's called Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. And there was some really interesting stuff in there, Grant, about a woman who had like not processed or had forgotten a childhood trauma that was deep inside of her. And then what happened was, in order for Eris to like bring it up and have it acknowledged, something triggered her, right? Something triggered her, and she became so dangerous to her husband, I think it was, that she needed to go to psychotherapy. And I might not be remembering this correctly, but when the traumas are deeply like cellular and hidden, and they're not being processed, Eris is not making it conscious, we're not throwing in the golden apple, that kind of stuff can go on where suddenly you're like really raging at your partner because something from my 8-year-old self got triggered. Do you want to talk about that at all, Grant?
Well, it must have been a while ago I posted that one. I don't recall exactly the anecdote you're talking about, but yes, that book was fascinating, and it's been tied in with the yoga therapy and processing through PTSD, because the body holds it. So much of psychology and psychiatry went down the Freudian route instead of the Jung route, right? And so it's very interesting to almost think of that as a shadow or as an unconscious, as a body knowledge versus a mind knowledge. And I think there's certainly a kinesthetic, an embodied world to be unlocked there. Everyone has it. Everybody's got this body that stores information, that's holding their past. And I think that's one of the great things about doing yoga too, is in moving that you feel, right? And that van der Groot, the guy who came up with that phrase about the body remembers, he is paving new ground in helping veterans deal with their PTSD and integrate back into civilian life, or people with long repressed trauma, really be able to feel safe to process it. I think that's part of the trauma frequency in the world right now, is just this inability to feel safe. That would be great to change somehow.
Yeah. Well, Jessica's going to get it in her solar return, and she already said that she walks in the room and she's one of those frequency amplifiers. Looking deeply into the shadow. So let's see, this is going to be an interesting year for Jessica with the solar return, having that Venus and Eris conjunct square Pluto. So you are the person to watch, my dear.
Oh, geez.
Emmeline, what do you want to say? Tell me all the things that are coming deep in you that you were feeling with that sinking to your knees. I want to hear more about that.
Oh, yeah. So I would say it was like, it's interesting frequency loops, because I'd forgotten that phrase. I know when we were beginning on the Facebook group last year with the learning, Eris was the key phrase, was the frequency loop breaker, and I completely forgot that. And that feels like what I was feeling was that frequency, like breaking my internal frequency loops. Because as I went internally, all I could do was like feel like the volcano inside, and it was like spiraling like this, round and round and round and round and round. And as I let it flow, then yeah, but then the emotions, like I explained about like society, but then I started to go into, and it's off the back of this the Sixth Sun documentary, because they were talking about, you know, dreaming yourself awake. And then I was, because what I've been feeling really deeply is missing that tribal community. I've never been in a tribe. I've visited a tribe in Africa, which was amazing. And every night, you know, I'd say to Johnny, we should be outside around a fire, chanting or like humming or singing or dancing, or, you know, that is real to me. And I feel like I'm dying because I don't have that. And like living in that tension, coupled with growing food, which we're getting into, which is great. But so I started to go into this dreaming space, and like in the documentary, they're saying, you know, they're around a fire and they're kind of like dreaming, and this vision that they have. So I decided, I just naturally started doing it and dreaming and visioning and like pushing and like really like expanding out. Like this has, you know, this has to be like this, creating this kind of community and building our own earthen cob house, which we want to do, and having our own land that we can have as service. It's not even, none of it is like egotistical. It's all like because we want to serve, you know. And it's like having this space, this sacred space, having these ways of earning money but not being dependent on money, and just wanting to stand for that, and pushing the fire out like a loop, like creating new loops, is what it felt like. And then I just felt like all that kind of angelic star soul family presence, you know, just because as I was tapping into me, I realized, oh, I'm tapping into me. Yeah. And I don't know.
Yeah, the community thing is big. I think the dancing, the fire, the having tribal music playing, in the documentary piece that I saw, just the beat of the drum, just drumming. And I know Jessica and Grant are often making videos drumming, and I'm just like, do people see them? You know, they're singing, they're drumming, they're doing ceremony. This is really, I mean, these are the seeds that I'm planting also. And we really need to plant. We need to expand that vision, like you said, Emily, and just keep sending it out. That's what the Magi are here for. They talked about the baby being given a rattle. Mm. You know, it's the rattle changes consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I used to do rattle workshops where my girls, we made rattles. We made rattles with deer skin. So we painted rattles, we made drums, we did sweat lodge for 7 years here with the girls in the sweat lodge, with a community coming in. And that kind of interconnected prayer space, right, is what the divine human so needs. So when we're separated and we're just getting paycheck and the only thing to look forward to is dinner, that's hard. That's not the divine human. And that's why just talking about this, like, here's my story. I'm going to tell you how it was. That's Eris. Like, let's make it conscious. Even if we disagree, which I always want to point out, like, we don't have to agree. And no one needs to believe me because it's all about, I'm just flipping the script on everything. So if you see me or hear me, you know, putting it out there going like, Lo, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? It's not that I believe in it. I'm just getting to see what everyone else wants to add and talk about. Like, let's argue even. I'm not afraid of Eris because we have to get it out there and talk about it and make sure it's true, that we're not being hijacked in any way, because basically for the last 6,000 years, we've been majorly hijacked. So part of it is just get it out there and talk, see what people think about this. I also want to put in something from Holly. So Holly is not on the group, but she was the one, Holly was the one who first found Astrea. So she is a really great asteroid astrologer. And she says that, you know, her perspective is that it's a justice pattern altogether, that there's justice being had, because Jupiter, Zeus, was the one who asked Paris to make a decision and make the discord like more just. And Astrea returns. By the way, what people may not know is that Astrea is exactly conjunct the sun and the moon right now. Right now, Astrea, asteroid number 5, of bringing that justice, bringing what is unconscious, all the traumas to light, and then allowing the divine human to emerge. Because when Astrea returns, she's allegedly bringing back the golden age. And Cobra did say, and Jessica put this in the chat, Cobra said the goddess is fully anchored. One of the other things that I also know from Cobra, and I can't remember whether he told this to me privately or it was at a conference, or if people are watching this, was it in a blog? He told me that Eris had everything to do with the liberation of this planet. And Cobra, I'm gonna email you, but what does Eris have to do with the liberation of this planet? And maybe this group is talking about that right now, you know, just making it more conscious, getting the traumas out. But is it also that Eris has many motherships around it, which Cobra has said about Chariklo, that the feminine star women that Emmeline is also connecting to her star family, are they on Eris? Because Cobra said many of the light ships are in the Kuiper belt, on the planets of the Kuiper belt. So Cobra, if you hear this, let us know what Eris has to do with the liberation of this planet. And then I want to hear from this group. Ask Eris, like in Dreamtime, start channeling her, or right now, Eris, what do you have to do with the liberation of this planet? What does that mean? And I'll hear from you.
What comes to mind is the Joan of Arc that Jessica was speaking about. Like, that real like tenacity to take it forwards. Like defining what you're saying about defining yourself, like envision yourself and be what it is that you have to give. And I feel like it's now, because a lot of it is, I think we're coming out of this mentality where we think we need to train for things, or like we do need to learn things, but it's like, because we've gone through this education system, this university system, it's always like, okay, just get another qualification and then you'll be prepared. What I'm facing at the moment is I don't need another qualification to start being me, and take it slowly, of course, but like it's not about me becoming something else. And perhaps that's related because it's very much like define who you are now rather than become something else. And we're sort of stripping away and simplifying back to who we are so that we can project the truth, which is better if it's simpler. Because if like the indigenous communities and stuff that we're, you know, watching and listening to, they're not like university educated. Well, some of them, no, actually, I'm wrong. I don't know a lot about it. Probably lots of them are, but like when you go to like tribal roots in Africa, for example, some of them aren't, but they have such deep wisdom, and that's kind of the reverse of the kind of more Western hedonistic, isn't it? And it's kind of raw. Perhaps also with the Beltane being now that kind of raw power surge. It doesn't matter exactly how you say it, but you just need to say it.
Yeah, Emily, I'm sorry, I'll just tie that thread. So in this group, you notice that I never like give everyone's qualifications. You know, I don't say, you know, and Emmeline from this, who went to this. That I am very purposeful in not really saying who we are or what our background is, because I am not my pieces of paper or my qualifications. I'm the authentic voice that I am. And I think that that is part of the liberation of all of the hierarchy that we've had, is that somehow the people from Mozambique, who are currently going through tremendous flooding, are less qualified or less interesting to report about or to uphold as people. So that's Eris. Like, let's acknowledge that there are millions of people without power and thousands of people are dead in flooding in Mozambique right now. They don't need any hierarchy to be qualified for our care and our love. And I think that's Eris throwing in a golden apple right there. So I'll be quiet now and see what people want to say.
I feel like Eris has the ability to say the party's not going to go on like this. So as much as people want to, let's just not talk about the stuff that's uncomfortable. I don't want to look at my issues. I don't have any issues. As if other people would get their stuff figured out, everything would be fine. It's not me. Like Eris doesn't allow the, you know, you to roll over your soul or the truth. And I love what you said about how Jupiter brings justice, and that life is just, like just creation itself, because it's alive and endowed with consciousness. It's just and it's good in and of itself. There's no need, like Emmeline's saying, to like prove it, get a paperwork, get a degree. There's just a natural respect that's an inalienable right of that which is alive. And so in a way, Eris grounds you back into the depths of the earth of your own being, the house of your soul, deep into those unconscious things that are not yet healed or integrated, so that the shadow isn't being projected outside of yourself. And ultimately that's our work, is to begin to integrate our own pieces of shadow. And to see like and this is like a tricky thing with Jungian stuff, because Jungians will tend to bring everything to the internal world. So everything represents your lens and how you're seeing it. So it's facing, I think, those enemies within us And as one of my teachers said, as we heal ourselves, we heal the world. If we unlock something for ourselves, it kind of, there's a new resonance in the field. And the more of us that have that piece unlocked, it creates that 100 monkey effect where everyone just knows it. It becomes common sense. So the deeper we go into our own wounds and make them conscious and talk about it and heal and explore it, then it'll just start to ripple out where, you know, there's a lot of people walking wounded who don't want to talk about it. So like you've said, if enough of us are willing to do that kind of work, it will kind of carry the human collective. But it can be dangerous. I mean, doing the shamanic work, it's never void of danger in the unconscious. I think I think ultimately it's a cosmic joke. It ends with laughter, or it's a divine comedy, but there are very real trials and tribulations on the path. And wisdom to be found in doing that work. But with wise teachers and wise guidance, so that discernment. So part of the structures that are falling are kind of the false gurus or the charlatans or those who are doing the work but not for a noble purpose. You know, I think just witnessing your own experience of having a Chiron return and how going through the wound kind of popped you. It was very painful, but then all of a sudden there was this opening. I think in some ways it's like either you can do your inner work consciously or you're going to get pulled into doing it. So, you know, all of us have a different roads, different wounds.
Yeah, I think I relate that back to that self-definition. You know, if Eris is saying to the fairest, then they're arguing over their belief, right? They're arguing over the ways in which they've defined themselves against the other, instead of defining from within who they are, right? And this, again, concept of a university degree needed, or, you know, getting some external authority to tell you now you're qualified, or now you know something, now you are defined as having this title. I think that's sort of the energy we're seeing or trying to become conscious of is, yeah, we have that within us. We don't need that external side. We don't need all of the, we don't need a degree to become conscious of our unconscious, perhaps, and to process and define for ourselves who we are.
But we do need sacred community too. So there is like that rub of like, right, it comes from within, but we do need like sacred witnesses. Because I think that's a part of the healing the shadow, is that once the shadow is witnessed, it can be released. So if we're denying the shadow, it gets bigger in the unconscious until it gets acknowledged. And that's Carl Jung.
Yeah. What is it called?
What's repressed in the unconscious will get bigger. What's acknowledged in the unconscious can be transformed and integrated.
Yeah, I want to pick up on both of those things real quick, Grant. I was thinking about that, incorporating your own inner Eris. And what we talked about last week with Saturn stationing on South Node of like your own personal boundaries. So I was pulling that together this week too. Like, gosh, there's a thread there. I was working on that same thing. Like, do I need anyone's external validation? like, and at the same time, what Jessica's saying, we do need sacred witnesses, definitely. So there, it's a paradox. And gosh, there was something, Emmeline put something up about Pandora was conjunct Mercury with Eris this week too. Like, there, all of it together is like, I don't need external validation. I am that I am, and I have my own boundaries and my energetic space, and I'm not going to be a doormat, nor do I need to prove to you that I have these certificates and therefore you should listen to me. But at the same time, we do need sacred witnesses, particularly with that project of wiping the tears. You know, there's so much trauma that it doesn't matter what your title is, but it's really good to be able to be heard. I think it's a really interesting paradox of both of those together, with Saturn saying, have a backbone, don't be a doormat, and Eris, you know, incorporating like, well, I don't need to prove it to anyone that I'm worthy. That's a big piece of Eris too, I think, is like, I don't need to throw in the golden apple because I know who I am. But Grant, you also posted something, and this is like why I always like put like, don't forget this, Grant, on your page. But there was something else too that was, okay. It was about the men and the women. Okay. So one man that I talked to, who's an Englishman, Emmeline, you actually know him, and he follows our YouTube and comments a lot. My dear brother, so I'm talking to you now. I was asking him if we needed to have separate men's groups, or could like men come to the Shakti retreat. And I really, you know, because I was trying to work it out with him, like that maybe we would have some kind of retreat, but do we need to keep the men separate from the women? And he said, and he's a real straight guy, like he calls himself a bloke because he's from England. He said, I think, I'm afraid if all the men got together, they wouldn't process, they wouldn't do the emotional stuff that there's right now. I can't imagine having a Shakti retreat for men. Although there's a man in Switzerland too who's listening to our videos who is ready to start doing this kind of stuff. So the question is, do men have the emotional strength right now to like process their trauma in a group? Or do they still need the women? Am I following that whole thing, Grant?
Yeah, I think it was an article in Harper's or something. There was some big post about men relying upon women for emotional processing, and the inability or almost denial of the need to feel, or the need to sort of have that feeling validated and processed externally somehow. And I don't think that's huge news, sort of feeling through that, thinking about my experiences there. But certainly it also resonates in the men's group that I had led for a while, and need to get back into that. It's there's a lot to unpack from the man box, and there isn't a lot of motivation to unpack it, maybe.
Is this symbolic and stuff? Do you want to share any personal examples?
I don't have any personal.
Do you want me to share some?
What I would just say that from my perspective in the men's group is it takes a very focused, dedicated leader to help keep things on track and to help make that safe space, make that connected space, and say, we're going to feel, guys, we're going to feel. Okay, I hear you want to talk about sports or you want to go your tangent, yes, but bring it back into feeling. And how does it land? Where are we at in our bodies? There's such an epidemic of loneliness for men as they age, as they don't feel connected. They've lived up here so much, and they're not recognizing the ways in which their bodies and feelings have needs and are valuable.
Yeah, I had a private session with Jessica this week, and I thanked her for her courage. But it's really the courage that you both have, you two together sitting there side by side. And I know you have your things, but you're willing to show up. You're willing to show up. This is it's like, right there is the Beltane. Okay, there's the green man, and there's Flora. And here it is. They're showing up. Flora is so beautiful that the green man, he leaves his oak grove. He can't resist her. He was all alone in his manly thoughts of the oak grove. But Flora came in. She was so beautiful. She was riding a white horse, and she smelled like springtime. And Green Man turned, and he breathed her in and said, I'm going to put down everything for you. And there they are, my dears.
Oh, gosh.
I think I'm having this strange awakening of like, I didn't realize men didn't feel. At 43 years old, like, because it's flipping the script on my internalization of how having feelings, I saw it as bad as a child. And I was trying to shut down my feelings or not have so many of them, or, not being able to recognize what my depth of feelings and how to ride that horse. And so I think there's an inner child in me that is healing of these are good, and actually men hunger for this. Because when I was growing up, I just had a lot of experiences of boys being really mean to me, and feeling this like lower than men, or being put down by boys, or having boys call me stupid. And so like a healing of that maybe patriarchal hierarchy, that false grid that archons established to disrupt the roles that the masculine and feminine play in inequality and how we do dance together. So there's kind of an awakening happening in me to see that in a different way. Because I really felt put down as a child for being, I internalized that I'm stupid. And, it wasn't until I was much older and in college, and I was actually earning honors in college, where I was like, oh, maybe I'm not stupid. I'm just, but yeah, that was so internalized in me. And I think maybe just feeling like the feminine wasn't valued. Certainly in the churches that I worked at, God was male. Male things were divine. And the feminine was less than divine.
Eve was responsible for the fall.
Everything that happened in life was Eve's fault, which comes around like as a mom, everything's my fault. All right. So there's just some deep healing around like feeling the hunger that humanity has for the feminine, and then feeling maybe that rift of the first wound that we experienced in being separate from our mothers, maybe when the cord is cut, or being separate from the divine mother when
our soul comes into the world,
or when the divinities left. I mean, if I'm forgetting, the Star Maiden, when she left, that almost experience of the gaze, or in the Adam and Eve story, heaven, the Garden of Eden, was sealed with an angel with two fiery swords. And And we, Adam and Eve were not allowed to come back into the Garden of Eve. We weren't allowed to eat the golden apples anymore. We weren't allowed to feed on the eternal life anymore. And so that deep wound in the unconscious of all of us of being separate from the goddess, and how that plays out, how that's kind of at the root of a lot of people's hunger, but also people's like, fine, I don't need her. I'll I'll just distract myself from this immense pain because it's so big I don't even think I can process it. Or the sense of if I even go there, it'll open up a floodgate of too much that I won't be able to handle it and I'll go crazy. I think I experienced that with a lot of intellectuals. It's like the fear of going into the body all the way for the fear of becoming barbaric. And that's probably an archonic program as well that pitted the more high society and higher class against the natives who were not honored for their wisdom of the earth, but seen as barbaric. When everyone can be barbaric, that's why the gods left us. So.
Yeah, this group, by the way, has a lot of Scorpio energy. So some of our groups are, a little bit more. We got Gemini, we got Virgo, we got Sagittarius. I mean, Grand Sagittarius. But I think I also want to point out that if the viewers can feel, I think that Emmeline, you at least have like 3 planets in Scorpio.
4.
Yeah. I know Grant has like 3 planets in Scorpio or something like that. And Jessica has her ascendant with, as she said, Uranus there. So these are the feelers of the group. And you notice how the feelers continue to show up and feel. So they're a part of the Magi who has not really been heard before, because generally astrologers are very much in their head. If you listen to astrologers, they know all the stories, they know the aspects, they know the definitions, but the feeling behind what this all means and the darker shadow stuff, what brings us down onto our knees, is not really part of the conversation. And that's why I feel like this is a shamanic group also, because we're willing to go and embrace all of that. That we don't have to always be light or positive or right. We can get into the deep, dark, occult, esoteric, hidden stuff that's intense and emotional, and that's Scorpio. Yeah, and Scorpio's been, very like mistreated by astrologers, to tell you the fact, because people are afraid of Scorpio. They don't want to talk to the Scorpio people because they're going to bring up the deep, dark stuff of where is the goddess, like that's Scorpio. So this group is really interesting today because we're missing some of our other speakers who can very much pull it up from, the mind and the cosmic realm and stuff. These ones are feeling. So everyone who's listening to this group, notice that about the speakers today. There's a lot of Scorpio energy here. Emmeline, you want to bring up some other deep, dark feeling issues?
Yeah, I was just remembering again the moment I had on my knees, and I really felt, because I have the Pluto. I think a lot of people born around Pluto travels so slowly, doesn't it? But I have Pluto in Scorpio, and I really came in connection this week with feeling like the hell experience of Pluto. Just like, I actually feel like I live partly in hell, like in my emotional state. And interesting with Venus. And the funny thing is that I don't mind feeling it, to be honest, because it feels like home. Because it's like part of who I am and my mission. And with Venus being, you know, part of my stellium and Scorpio, I was thinking about Venus and Eris, and I was thinking about Venus needing to feel appreciated and loved, and really going into that deep place of how can you give yourself more love? How can you give yourself more love and self-care? And for me, it's that continuous journey of how can I go deeper and deeper into that space. But where we're living is actually a basement flat, and the room that I do most of my yoga and meditation in is a tiny little room with a tiny little window, and I can just about see a willow tree outside, and that just epitomates by like kind of what I work through and what I'm kind of expanding and being in. But it really, I felt this imprisonment this week. My psyche, you know, I feel internally the psyche that was imprisoned coming out so I could see it around me, you know, like this is imprisonment, and how can I expand through that imprisonment, and, you know, the human collective feeling imprisoned, and feeling, yeah, I will carry that and move that out. But it's really reassuring with Eris because it gives the power to speak that. And Venus being in Aries, yeah, like she's getting all her power to kind of fire through and initiate. And you know, when you're in groups of people and you feel, I feel so much energy, and often what most comes to me is I feel shame, or I feel, I'm like, why are we not talking about sexual trauma and all these other taboo issues? I just, they're all going through my head, and because they're not spoken about, I feel embarrassed because they all collect in me. I'm like, why do I feel all this stuff? It's everyone else's stuff, but like it's also mine because we're one. So it's like, you know, Eris, it's giving this defiance and this strength to say, well, it's okay, like this is part of who I am. My mission here is to do this, however I do this. Yeah.
I want to just point out some things about your Scorpio nature, Emmeline. So people who are studying astrology, because we actually had several new members join this week, listen to how Emmeline's explaining that she can feel everyone else's sexual trauma. And Jessica also said that she can walk in a room and see shadow. She can immediately feel, see, intuit, know. The Scorpion energy is, they are like the private detectives of astrology. They are undercover. You don't know necessarily who they are, but they can see you. They can see you, and they can feel you, and they can feel your sexual trauma, and they can feel your shadow and everything that you're not talking about. And that's why Scorpio is like taboo, because, you know, astrologers are a little bit nervous about that Scorpio thing, because everyone can feel what's hidden in me when they've got that Scorpio supernatural power to do so. And Eris is saying, you know, we have to bring it up and break these frequency loops. And so Scorpio is like the wise warrior. They can bring it up. Let's go into the shadow. Let's talk about how it really feels to just make money and look forward to your dinner, but not have community, and not have drumming, and not have ceremony, and not have dancing, and not have, or, you know, a lot of, you know, I'm going to be very straight about this. A lot of people are posting on suicide awareness right now with actual pictures of people trying to commit suicide and other people grabbing them and hugging them.
Mm.
Oh,
So someone tried to jump off the bridge in London today, Emily.
Wow.
And it immediately hit social media because it took an hour to recover this person safely from the other side of the bridge. But a whole group of men were holding him.
oh.
And the men all came to this man who was trying to jump, and they held him for over an hour and talked to him. And that's the divine masculine. He does feel, it's deep in there. He's trying to show up. And sometimes it hurts so bad he wants to jump. But those other men are there holding him, and the Scorpio women are feeling it, right? Yeah. But as Jessica said, when we keep suppressing the collective trauma, it gets bigger. So that's why this group talks about these things. We're going to bring it up.
You had a beautiful sharing about some of the ancient myths with Pluto. I was really feeling into Pluto this week, and all this music has been coming when everybody's alone, and I'll start to sing. And so I was singing songs to Pluto this week and feeling into, I think the mystery that you were sharing was that he was really connected to the Demeter mysteries. And that before it was Pluto, it was Demeter, or it was Eris. It was a goddess that was in the underworld before it kind of became like this dark masculine figure. And you were sharing some stuff about doorways, and doorways being sacred markers and linked to the vulva, linked to the entrance to the sacred womb. And I wonder too, like, part of this going into the unconscious is going into the womb. It's going into the depths, which is the heart of the goddess. And Eris was a character that was known to just have just this excruciating pain that nobody could visit her, because if they visited her, she would die, or they would die. So and part of this shadow work, I think, is transmuting the pain that is in the human heart that feels unbearable, or it feels like it will kill us if we go there. And yet, as scary as Pluto could be, that energy also has a very loving and devoted aspect to it. And I didn't know if you wanted to share more about that myth as kind of another aspect of the unconscious becoming conscious.
Well, Jessica had asked in the group this week if Eris had anything to do with Eris, because Eris's first part is Eris. And as Jessica just said, Eris is always in mourning. She's crying. She's in the underworld and she's suffering. And the way that Inanna, when Venus is retrograde, releases herself from the underworld is she leaves those two pieces of dirt at the doorway that then become these little beings that go and comfort Eris and say, I hear you crying. I hear your sorrow. I feel your pain. And it's the first time that Eris is ever able to be relieved, because someone was there compassionately listening to her. And then she gives those little pieces of dirt that came from Inanna's fingernails this boon. Whoa, you listened to me. You were there. You witnessed my pain. the wiping of the tears. You were there for me. And then they say, the little pieces of dirt say, we would like the Queen of Heaven back. That's a very potent story for me. That's one of the most potent stories, is that Eris, which is that part of Ereshkigal, needs to be acknowledged. She needs to be acknowledged, or she's going to throw in the golden apple of strife and discord. So it's that listening to each other. It's being able to say that someone was attempting suicide, and not always being like the light and the bright, but what are the deep issues that humankind is really facing? And Demeter, who is Ceres, so we were talking about in the last two sessions, Ceres, which is spelled Ceres, is the goddess of agriculture, fertility, and abundance. But her other name is Demeter. And what Jessica's referring to is that before Pluto was part of the pantheon, Demeter was the queen mother of the underworld, who received all beings who were dying, died, and needed to be reborn. So the great mother was Demeter. And what's interesting about this whole conversation is that Demeter was part of the Eleusinian story of going into the underworld and entering the great mother through her vulva. And you had to be willing to face your death to enter the great mother. And one of the symbols was people would paint their door red. So my front door is really red, like blood red, because that's...
Know that.
Yeah,
that's interesting, because the Episcopal Church always has a red door. My understanding from the theological side was that meant it was a safe haven. It was a place of refuge.
That's what it became, Jessica. That's right. But originally,
I didn't know that.
So originally, the way you were able to reach Demeter was to go down into the underworld, and there was a ceremony, sometimes with hallucinogens, from ergot, which is like a mold on the grain, mixed up, and there was sexual intercourse also, because part of it was the whole merging of the masculine and feminine. Some people say that it was actually like a lot of sexual intercourse, like orgy level sexual intercourse, but it was getting you out of your mind enough and out of your fear enough to really enter the doorway of the mother. So what traumas do we have from that red door is what Emmeline was talking about, is then Pluto got separated off, and we all had this sexual trauma around, feeling bad about our sexuality, or feeling like that's something that no one's going to speak about. That's something we're going to deeply suppress. And Pluto split off to be this god of the underworld, separating himself and then abducting Demeter's own daughter, Persephone. So, I understand what this whole myth means, and maybe the group is starting to feel it. You have to feel into what this means. But it was the separating off of the masculine and him becoming the god of the underworld, and then abducting the maiden, which was the daughter of Demeter, which caused Ceres or Demeter then to wander the earth crying and unable to bring the fertility. You don't have to understand this today, okay? But this is like ceremonially, in ancient cultures, we acted this out. We acted it in a ceremony. We put on costumes. We did the whole ritual so that you could get deep into your body. What does this story mean? Because you can't understand it here. I understand it because I've lived it and talked about it and painted my door red and, felt this so often. So if you have Pluto in Scorpio, like Emmeline does,
and
that's the deep, dark stuff of the sexuality there too. that's hidden. What were you going to say, Jessica?
Oh, I think Grant has Pluto in Scorpio as well. Or is it in, do you remember? Maybe Lolita knows. I don't have it with me.
Well, I have my giant notebook of everyone's chart. Grant, you have Moon, Venus, and Mercury in Scorpio.
That's right.
If you have Pluto there too, that's a stellium. Like
Yeah.
Emmeline has.
Let me just.
So Emmeline, did you know that story? I had posted that in the group this week. Did you know about the whole Demeter and Pluto splitting off?
No.
Oh, you're conjunct.
I found out that Ceres and Demeter was pretty much synonymous, and for me Ceres is really prevalent in my chart, so I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But no, I didn't know that, and it does strike a chord. Yeah.
See, when the separating off, now I'll try to explain it, from my thinking mind. When the separating off happened, Pluto became a rapist.
Right.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, yeah, that definitely fits.
Almost like when we forgot to keep sexuality as a part of the sacredness of humanity.
Integrated. Divided then.
Yeah, so Grant's Pluto is actually in Libra, conjunct the marriage bed. So.
So good. Good. Yeah, and see how if you can study your own chart, you can make sense of the way the celestials are bringing your soul agreement down into the terrestrial realm. Because if Pluto in Libra, which is about the path of relationship as a path to God, that's what Libra is, okay? It's about my relationship is my path to God. If Pluto's there, it's like the depths of the relationship, like the ups and the downs and the underworld, and every bit of the shadow is also the path to God, particularly when it's in that sacred marriage bed. Let's have the ups and the downs and every bit of the underworld stuff, and rebirth the sacred marriage bed as a path to God. So, I mean, when I'm watching you all, I have this kind of stuff going, of course it is. We're all living it out so beautifully, which is why it's really important to be able to study your chart, because then you can stop beating yourself. Going, why is it like this? Why is it like this? It's like this because we chose these paths. Everyone is absolutely a unique path. I cannot recreate a chart. Every single person says, you mean this is only my chart that says this? Every single chart is the perfect, unique cell in the consciousness of humankind. So live your life, do your life. You self-validate yourself, that you don't need to be anything more than you are. You are doing it in the sacred marriage bed, in whatever way that you do it. You're bringing consciousness to humankind. So let's start to close now because we're within 5 minutes. What closing thoughts or questions or kind of wrap up do people want to offer?
I think a key central thing for me has been, now is the time for really accepting. I just feel I've been able to accept, or what we've been speaking about, like all of this feminine divine goddess power within me. It's been like very much like in my mind, but I feel like now it's coming out, and it's like I can accept this, and now is the time, and I understand that this is real. It's gone from a state of being like fluffy to like being real and relevant and powerful, like not just relevant, powerful and strong. And I think that's we're doing that. We're standing in that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I am surprised and shocked when I started this journey a while ago of trying to, and my journey began in the church going, where's the goddess? Where's the divine feminine? And kind of discovering these stories. And then the book that I recently wrote had a big piece on Eris, in terms of making sense of the fall of humanity. And then to hear that Cobra is talking about Eris, Cobra is talking about Inanna. It's just like this goddess energy is not only deep in our psyche, but it's really deep out into the universe. And it is very humbling. It does bring you to your knees as an aspect that does need to be acknowledged and integrated within us. And I think for all the ways in which we've beat up the feminine in ourselves, or beat up our feeling nature or intuition, in favor of a more scientific, rational understanding of the world, like we're really healing and recovering an awareness of beauty. And maybe that's Eris and Aphrodite too, that beauty is subversive. Creation is beautiful. Life is beautiful. And the beauty of life will win in the end, to have that faith that we're gonna carry it out of the dark ages back into being conscious of our shadows. We're gonna get through that door of Valhalla.
Yeah, Grant, do you want to say anything on the man's side there?
From the man's perspective, I feel great. It's good. It's good. No, I think there is an awareness growing. It's that energy growing. It's that acknowledgement that there's been too much masculine, or there's too much of a patriarchal control, of a too logical, too much mental dissection, and not enough womb connection, womb love. That acknowledgement of how our actions influence the world around us. Times are changing, certainly. Old hierarchies are falling, and I think even within ourselves, those patterns or those ruts, right? I think, I had some major transformations this week myself of, why am I thinking this way? How did I get here? I don't have to think that way anymore. And the big one for me was, it's easier than you think. And the mental blocks that I was putting in front of things, I would say it's easier than you think, and then I would do them. And it was easier than I thought. And that's been a new helpful mental pattern for me.
Wow, Grant. And one of the labels that I've given you from your ascendant when we were playing that game was perfecting the mysteries of a sharp mind.
Yep.
Perfecting the mysteries of the sharp mind. And you all just heard Grant, because he's kind of like the spokesperson for perfecting the mysteries of the sharp mind. He's figuring out how to look at his mind and what the mind is saying. And then he's able to say back to the mind, it's easier than you think. See, that is the perfecting the mysteries of the sharp mind, is that your mind is so sharp, because I've worked with you. And I'm just going, if you think you can do this, man, go ahead, because it's way beyond me. Because Grant's mind is really sharp. And I don't know how he's doing it. He's truly like a shaman to me, because I can't figure out his mind. Like, how could you know that, Grant? To me, that's like a shaman thing.
Yeah, and I can understand him.
Yeah, but I mean, what's interesting is he's able to look at his mind now, and that's part of yoga too, is like the modifications of mind stuff. Like, have a look at that and say, don't make it too complicated. It can be easier than that. Let's just feel what the body says. These are old programs. The mind is mental tapes and so forth. So anyways, I want to just close now with something I was telling Jessica that I understand also from Cobra, but also my own intuition, is that we don't need to be perfect. What we need to do is plant the seeds right now for the golden age. Okay, so when and if there is going to be an event, or what people call the second coming, or what the harvest, or whatever it is that people call the Christed light that is coming to earth, you don't have to be perfect. What you have is to be able to plant the seeds of the next golden age by being fully conscious. Okay, so what we're doing is making it as conscious as possible. And like Jessica said, then it's the 100th monkey. Only 2% of us need to figure it out. And the 98% will just go, oh yeah, let's plant that seed. Yeah, let's relieve that trauma. It's not that difficult, like Grant said. It's easier than you think. So let's close like this, because we can talk for a long time, but I really appreciate, much gratitude to this incredible Scorpio energy of this group that can feel. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all, and bye-bye for now.
Bye.